one of the challenges we've always had is, knowing where first to get the metrics and understanding what the metrics mean. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve to get started. We're actually going to do a live demo of our IMC, our Integrated Marketing Cloud Platform. And then again, if there's any questions as you guys join, please just do it in the chat and we'll stop and answer them as we go. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Sexton.
Great. Thank you, Rich. So I want to start with a little bit of a thought starter here. And I want everybody to just kind of sit back and look at this picture and think about what you feel like this is depicting. We've done this many times, across the country. We always, usually we're in person. We ask people to throw up their hands and kind of give us a thought of what they think this represents. I think we've had one or two people get it right so far, Rich, but for the most part, we've gotten responses, everything from wind resistance to bullet holes, and probably everything in between as well. But ultimately, what does this mean? Right? The reason that we utilize this picture is because it really depicts what we're calling survivorship bias. And survivorship bias is a logical error in which attention is paid only to the entities that have passed through a selective filter. Now, what does that mean? It means we're basically utilizing the data that's available to us or that's easily accessible to us to make some sort of decision moving forward, right? So if we go back to this picture and now we say, okay, what does this have to do with survivorship bias? Well, this is actually a true story of something that happened after World War II. When the planes were coming in during World War II, they would have scientists go through and mark every single area that there were bullet holes in the plane as they were returning. And they would map it out on a diagram just like this. So as they're sitting there with kind of the aviation engineers and walking through, all of the data that's at their disposal, they're sitting down and saying, okay, here are all the planes that came back to us. Here are where the bullet holes actually were occurring most often. We need to go and bolster our planes in all of these areas, right, to make them stronger. And it took one person who was sitting in the back and goes, well, let's hold on a second, guys. If we're looking at all of this data, and these are the planes that are returning, I think what we should actually be doing is bolstering the planes in the places where there are no bullet holes, because clearly a plane can return home if it has bullet holes in all of these areas. What we're not seeing is the planes that don't come home probably have bullet holes in the areas that we're not seeing bullet holes depicted on, right? Which means that those are the areas that a plane can't survive in. So if we're only looking at the data of returning flights, we're only getting a piece of the story. Right? So again, the initial thing might say, okay, let's fix these areas, when really what we should be looking at is fixing the areas with no bullet holes. Okay, so great story.
Great point, Steve. And I think that goes directly to what we're going to talk about today is the marketing side. If we're looking at bad metrics or bad data or making decisions on data that's provided and that's the only data we have, then we tend to make bad conclusions of where we should spend money or where we spend time and tactics. So again, tying this into how we look at a marketing plan as a whole and how we use the right data or the right metrics to make the right decisions.
Absolutely. So to Rich's point, how does this story of survivorship bias apply to automotive marketing, right? What does it really mean? So we'll answer that question with a question. If I were to sit down with anybody that's on this call today and I'd say, hey, how do we know our advertising is working? I'm sure we would get a number of different responses, right? Oh, well, I track ROI this way. I see this. I look at this metric through my Google Analytics. Fantastic. Good. We want to make sure that we're doing all of that. However, by utilizing the data that's easily accessible to us, are we falling into that survivorship bias? And when we talk about this a lot, this is a little bit of we'll call it a clickbaity title, is why did attribution die? But as marketers, we've really been trained on looking at attribution metrics. We've been told, okay, you need to go into your GA4, you need to look at your bounce rates, you need to look at your clicks, your click-through rates, your conversions. And so many things are happening on the back end that are really killing the way that we're looking at attribution. We know that shoppers are visiting, via multiple touch points. They're seeing all sorts of ads before they actually land on a dealer's website. There are anti-tracking, privacy laws, cookie changes, you name it. All of these things are coming into play that are really killing the way that we're looking at attribution. And this is a way that we've been trained to look at campaigns since I've been involved in the business, right? So since digital really started to come into play, we've been very reliant on looking at our analytics to figure out what is working and what's not working. And a lot of that is really coming down to last click. What's the last thing that a customer did before they landed on our site that ultimately got them to submit a lead for a car or service, and then they ended up buying or servicing their vehicle, right? But
See, great point. And one of the things I just want to comment on, listen, last touch attribution is kind of a bad word, right? We kind of joke about that in the marketing side, but myself being a former dealer and being on that side of the table, that side of the desk, we're really trained by the marketers to come in and tell us, hey, click-through rate, time on site, and those are all important metrics. Still, we're not saying those are not things that we should be looking at or things that we shouldn't take into consideration, but it's not the whole story. It is not really where you're getting your final attribution from that's going to make or should make you make the next decision of where you're spending your money or where you're spending your money at.
Absolutely. Great point. And to that exact point, if a campaign doesn't contribute directly to on-site performance, so clicks, conversions, or engagement, is it considered successful? And I hope everybody that's on this call would say, well, no, like, yes. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily contribute to a click. We all know that, TV advertising works in some way, shape, or form, right? Brands spend millions and millions of dollars on TV advertising for one spot in the Super Bowl. So we obviously know that it works, but we really can't track anything directly tied to a TV ad or a billboard ad or direct mail, but we know that it's working in some way, shape, or form, right? So we then say, okay, well, we now know that just from that example alone, that GA4 is not fully representative of an advertising journey, right? They may see a TV ad, they may go to your website, they may go to Facebook and then get retargeted for your website. Click the Facebook ad, come back, and then we attribute that sale to Facebook. When really, maybe TV was the first thing they saw. Maybe they were watching Hulu and got a commercial, and then they started their shopping journey, right? So
Kind of ties, Steve. Like if I asked anyone who went to NADA this year, how did you get there? And most people would say by plane, I would think. But this year, I would say is plane, trains, and automobiles, right? Because a lot of people couldn't get there by plane or partially by plane, and then had to get in a car or get in a train. We had a lot of our teammates. So again, kind of the same thing. Yes, flight was part of that process, but there were multiple touch points to get to NADA. Same thing. How do you get those customers to your website? How do you get them to convert? That's a multi-touch attribution point, and it's not all in GA4. So
exactly. So how do we evaluate channel and campaign performance, right? If we can't rely on GA4, which again, I'm not saying we don't utilize GA4. That's absolutely a critical piece of all the advertising that's happening. But there are probably, I know for a fact, there are other ways that we should be looking at that as well. And that's really where, Stream comes into play.